You know what I really love about that structure are the huge overhangs, and I think there's a real opportunity for that approach on these rocky sites in Muskoka and Haliburton. If we can build over the terrain and not constantly be blasting, trying to fit in these flat monolithic boxes, it's a real design opportunity.
You're listening to On the Lake, the podcast that explores the rhythms of waterfront living and what it takes to build your dream lakeside home on the Canadian Shield. And now for your host, James Pitropov.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to On the Lake, episode number 3, Timber Frame Cottages, what clients need to know before falling in love. Let's get right into timber frame construction, what it is and what it isn't. Timber frame has been around for quite a long time, and it is really just in the last 50 or 60 years that it has had a resurgence in Canadian architecture. If we look at such architectural giants such as Frank Lloyd Wright, earlier in the 20th century, they were looking back at those famous Japanese timber structures, and particularly the Japanese Imperial Hotel, of all things, was a structure completely built out of timbers. Mid-century and beyond, architects here in Canada, two that are particularly notable and that you'll hear me speaking about quite a bit, Arthur Erickson and Ron Thom, iconic contemporary West Coast timber frame architects, mid-century, modern, that genre, they reinterpreted the timber frame, and it has had a big resurgence in, of all places, cottage country. Now, a lot of people might be familiar with traditional timber frame that you might see in an old Ontario or Quebec farmhouse. Heavy timbers with hand-cut mortise and tenon joinery. Really beautiful look. You see the markings of woodworking by hand on the timbers. Amazing examples of this in Ontario, Mennonite country, Fergus, Elora. Beautiful. It's a beautiful construction technique. The timbers are built off-site, erected on-site by groups of workers. It's a great style. That's not the timber frame that we're doing these days. Log construction. Is log construction timber frame? Well, log construction, fantastic. Norwegian scribed joinery. It's a really cool look. Squared construction. Is that the timber frame that we're going to talk about today? No. Things have moved on into a new direction, which is really exciting. So what we're focused on is actual pure timber framing, which previously was all done by hand and still can be. But now, as we'll discuss with our guest today, with Nico, with the advent of CNC machine cutting of timbers and the joinery, we can still get a traditional look. We can get a more modern look. But the thing now is we can incorporate more modern detailing, stronger detailing, concealed metal plates, concealed joinery, concealed steel structure within traditional beams. So not only can we do a beautiful timber frame, but we can get those fantastic big overhangs on the lakes that just seem to hover over the landscape. Currently, I'm working on 4 interesting projects, 2 of which we're going to talk about today. Both are very modern. One has the sweeping roof lines over the Bay of Quinte in southern Ontario. The other one, right in Canadian Shield country, heavy timbers with giant overhangs. I guarantee you're not going to see this anywhere on the media these days. It's taking timber construction and applying it to more modern, open concepts that people are looking for today, but it still has the handcrafted touch. You're absolutely going to love it. Please join me now with our colleague and friend, Nico from Bridgewood Engineering. Today I have a very special guest, a colleague and a good friend, Nico. He is the owner and the president of Bridgewood Engineering. We are going to get into the details of good design, planning, and some new technologies that are out there. Welcome aboard, Nico.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me.
Nico, tell us what's new today, Nico.
I have a new office. Maybe I can tell a bit about Bridgewood Engineering Services. We are an engineering and design firm specializing in timber frame. We're on a one-stop shop for timber solution. We work with architects like James, where we help with the design, we do the engineering, and we can also supply and install all the timber components. So we have to be like a one-stop shop for for timber solutions.
Nico, tell us a little bit about your past and your schooling. I find that quite interesting.
Yeah, so I'm from France, where I studied wood engineering. So I'm a structural engineer specializing in wood buildings. And in 2014, I came to Canada for a 6-month internship to get my master's degree, and never left. Yeah, actually, yeah, I arrived in March 12, 2014. So it was like my anniversary was a couple of days ago. But yeah, 12 years, and I'm loving it here. Like a lot of forest, a lot of wood construction, wood buildings. I had the opportunity to build my own house. I met my wife. We got a kid, and now I'm open to build my own company a few years back. So it's living the Canadian dream. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, Nico. I understand that you grew up in a Swiss village, and the local architecture there's a lot of timber construction where you grew up.
I'm born in Switzerland, but I grew up at the border in France, in the French Alps. So a lot of wood chalet, and yeah, that's where that started my love for wood building. Is that those chalets are just beautiful, and they've been standing for like hundreds of years, and and it just feels like so cozy inside, and it's just so beautiful. So yeah, I always knew I wanted to do something with building with wood. It's just fun.
How did you end up in Ontario, Nico? Like, particularly in cottage country, what was the draw for you?
Yeah, so well, I had sent, I don't know, probably 200 emails all over North America, and a company called Viceroy got back to me, and they gave me two options. They said, do you want to go to Vancouver or Port Hope? I didn't know anything about Canada. I look at the map, I said, oh, Vancouver looks nice, and well, finally there was no more room in Vancouver, so they sent me in Port Hope. And yeah, I was not very prepared when I arrived. Like in March, I didn't realize that in Europe, March is still pretty warm. Here, I arrived in Port Hope, super small village, super cold. Yeah, I was not expecting it. Really not prepared. But it was tough. But then from there, everything got better. I got friends. They helped me to find a better place. And yeah, and just been amazing since then.
Yeah, it's interesting that you started out in Port Hope. Like, Port Hope has such an interesting history to it, and some of the architecture is quite unique. A lot of heritage architecture there.
Yeah, beautiful buildings on the main street for sure.
And Nico, how did you become interested in the heavy timber in particular? I know that you have a master's degree in timber technology. How did you get into all of that?
Where I grew up, a lot of wood buildings, and I decided to study like wood engineering. And I also, as a kid, I always loved like visiting castles, cathedrals, where you see all those heavy timbers, all those connections standing for like hundreds of years. And I always found it very interesting, like the joinery between those timbers, the craftsmanship, knowing that, yeah, hundreds of years we could do that. So, and it's still standing, and those are beautiful. And then when I arrived here, I saw that also was something pretty popular, and there was like a lot of work in the industry, like to build beautiful cottages with timber frame. And I worked for a company that had CNC machines where everything is pre-cut, and I just fell in love with the whole process, where it's just so fun to be able to, you engineer something, you design it, you send it to the machine, then you build it. So you see the whole process from start to finish, from like a little drawing on the paper to like the full building, full process.
You know, it's so interesting, Nico. My background is that I started out west, of all places, and I had an early start with architecture and engineering firms out of Calgary. We were designing and building ski chalets in places like Fernie, BC. So I was introduced to the craft end of it, heavy timbers, big construction. And then when I came back to Ontario, I noted in cottage country, the idea of cottage wasn't as fully developed with heavy timber construction yet, but I think there was always a connection here in that I guess the tradition of arts and crafts, architecture, timber frame can lend itself to it, particularly with the detailing and the framing, which a lot of people may have seen and may be interested in. What's interesting with your practice, Nico, is that you've also taken to the technology quite wholeheartedly, and that the CNC aspect of custom cutting timbers before framing is quite interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've done with CNC, Nico?
Yeah, so CNC machine really allow us to be like super precise. Like our machine is a 5-axis, has a lot of different tools, 5 axes. It's as precise as you can be with wood. And it saves you also a lot of time. Like cutting a lot of joinery between timbers will be like a mortise and tenon, where you have the tenon, which will be the male part, and the mortise, like the female part. And those connections, if you had to cut them by hand, it takes a lot of time, where a CNC machine can do it in a couple of minutes. So by doing that, you save a lot of time, and you also have great quality. So after the machine, you can check, make sure all. So you spend most of the time actually checking, making sure everything checks, everything fits well, instead of spending most of the time cutting it. So it allows you, great accuracy and a great quality.
So to be clear for viewers and listeners, the joinery of the heavy timbers is a big part of the craft and the structural integrity of what we're building. And traditionally, these were mortise and tenon, hand-cut joints, and so on. And people still do that, don't they? There's still room for the traditional way of putting together these timber structures. Now, what you're doing now with CNC, so automated, I guess you're designing an AutoCAD 3D modeling software, and you're pre-cutting the timbers so that they can be fitted off-site and then rebuilt on-site with precision.
That's correct.
Possibly what that could do is, previously, at least with the work that we've done, you would need really skilled craftspeople to do the joinery. Now, it probably opens it up to a wider range of installers because it's becoming more assembly and less craft on site. Is that?
Yeah, it's pretty much a Lego set now. Like we have drawings where you have piece numbers, and so all the pieces, like number 100 goes with 101. You put it together, like you either a screw or a peg. So it actually gets. I built my own house, and I'm an engineer, so it gets pretty. It's not that complicated.
So you're personally living the timber frame dream, eh, Nico?
That's correct. Yeah.
So, Nico, the projects that we've been involved in, I guess they come in different types. Previously to meeting you, I did a lot of traditional timber frame, and then I've done a lot of post and beam. And some people ask about the difference in it. So what I do is I like to point people back to some iconic Canadian architects, such as Ron Tom and Arthur Erickson as well, both prominent West Coast architects during the 60s and 70s and onwards. Their style was a little bit different. What they would do is they would have their posts, and then they would saddle double beams, double timbers, so that things were not so much cut into each other like a true timber frame. Like a barn, things are cut and fitted together, and it goes up in parallel bends. It's taken down and it's put back up again. What we were doing is I'm doing a lot of that mid-century modern post and beam, and that is still aligned with the type of the work that we're doing together now. What I've liked about the timber work that we're doing with on the CNC machines with you is that in some ways it's more predictable, and it's advantageous to build things off a site, isn't it? Now,
exactly.
One interesting opportunity we had, Nico, and maybe you can tell our viewers a little bit about it, was we have a project on Chandos Lake, which is in the Canadian Shield, and it's a heavy timber project. Now, the thing, however, though it's heavy timber, doesn't mean it has to look heavy. We wanted to have this almost floating structure with big overhangs overhanging the landscape on the lake there. You introduced some steel into there, which I found really interesting, to get those big overhangs. But what can you do with the overhangs, Nico? Like, what can you do with steel, a hybrid of timber and steel?
Yeah, so that was a beautiful design you did, and because of the very large overhang, we had some very high loading, and we didn't want to use like too big of a beam. So
because the timbers get bigger with the long spans, the timbers start getting really deep, and
they get too deep, and then it looks out of proportion. So what we did is actually we use for the certain beam, like the one that we're going to get too deep, we use like steel beams that then we ended up being cladded. And so at the end of the day, the homeowner, we don't realize there are steel beams. Because on this project, it was not the intention to show steel. Like, you can do project where it's also cool to have some steel accents and things like that. I don't think that was what we wanted to do in that project. But like I said, all the steel beams will then be cladded with the same materials and the post and some of the beams. So it will all look like a timber frame, modern timber frame.
Yeah. You know, what I really love about that structure are the huge overhangs. And I think there's a real opportunity for that approach on these rocky sites in Muskoka and Haliburton. If we can build over the terrain and not constantly blasting, trying to fit in these flat monolithic boxes, it's a real design opportunity for us. So some of the questions that we get, Nico, I guess obviously there are different degrees to which you can do timber frame. And for viewers that aren't completely familiar with the beauty, let's say the beauty of timber frame, please check out our websites. You can check out lakesidearchitecture.ca, Lakeside Construction Management for the build side, and then please check out Nico's website. You can look him up, Bridgewood Engineering. Nico, can you tell us something about the cost, like cost aspects? What I found with clients is they come in certain categories. So there are ones that like a little bit of timber accents, and on the other end of the spectrum, there are others that want the full extreme 100% timber frame. But on some projects, I'm working on a few with you. We're working on another one on the Bay of Quinte. Now the difference is Chandos Lake in the Canadian Shield is a full timber frame. The one on Bay of Quinte is a hybrid where we use a bit of both. Where do you personally draw the line, like on design, like with costs, with time frames, availability? Like, where do you see the sweet spot for how much timber to have in your projects to have manageable costs and still have a great design?
Yeah, I guess it all depends of what look we're going for. If we're going for like a very like traditional timber frame house, or if we're going with a very modern house with very clean lines and more minimalist. Also depends on the budget. Like timbers, when you add timbers, if it's well thought, it wouldn't add too much to the cost. But if it's not well thought, like it can bring a lot, because then every structural numbers get doubled. So it can add a lot to the cost. But so for that project, I think it was smart how like timbers were added on particular area where it would add values to the house, the screen porch, some nice overhangs, like some in the great room. Like there is a main area where it looks nice to add some timbers and really add something to the design of the house.
Yeah. So, Nico, here's what I'm hearing from clients and from people out there and what they seem to like. Clients like the timber frame look. They like the more open spans, the big Douglas fir that we bring in. There's different grades of it. There's clear fir. There's fir that has more of the grain in it and so on. So we get the timber look. And some are purists. They like the idea of the full structure. They've seen the timber frames maybe when they're skiing out west or at chalets or in Quebec. There are some beautiful examples of timber frame. And I know that some designers and builders out there, they will attempt a hybrid and they'll scatter timber frames in between all the drywall, which clients aren't too crazy about. But what we did at Quinte, at the Bay of Quinte with you, I thought was interesting. So just for the viewers, 3,500 square foot cottage. Really, it's a house that they're going to retire to right on the waterfront. Quite interesting. They like the timber frame look, but it didn't need to be throughout. And where they could save money, they would go for it. But where we could get them the full experience, we did. So what we did is instead of having a 2-story house, we did 2 stories on the bedroom wing with regular stick construction, but on the part of the house that has the great room, the kitchen, the dining room, a den. That is one floor with a sweeping roof line, a mono-slope roof. And by not having the second floor above, we did was pretty much a full timber frame on one part of the house. So that's a way to go. And I like we had the big overhangs there too, Nico. What we did is we also extended visually, the roof on the inside had Douglas fir planks underneath it, and we extended it past the window line right to the exterior. So do you like that look, Nico? Because I think your place has that idea.
Yeah, and when you like the exterior and the interior kind of match, and you have like On my house, you also have the rafters. They seem to go through the walls, but yeah, like it's very nice to have a well-thought project from outside and inside.
Nico, when people ask me about a budget for a timber frame on their place, I end up with two sort of sweet spots, and let me know if you agree or disagree. So on a lot of cottage projects, if they're looking at some timber frame, maybe on an entry, some individual beams in the kitchen, walkout covered porch is what a lot of clients are interested in. What I suggest is basic sort of highlights. Maybe running into like 150K to 200K, you're going to get a pretty good look, but light, like you're going into it light. And then to really go heavier on the timbers, you can end up at maybe 400,000, 500,000 if you want a really like a more of the heavy timber look. And then beyond that, really the sky's the limit. We've had clients asking for not only for the timber frame, not only for the traditional joinery, but they're also looking for peeled log, some of those resort type details. Are you getting people asking for those custom details, Nico? Like peeled logs and the giant driftwood beams? Like, do you get a lot of that?
We get sometimes asked where they really want the timbers to look old. So we have a machine that we call like a rustification, where we kind of scratch the timbers. So they look kind of like they came out of a barn. So some people like that. We've done projects where they actually like the timbers to look very rough. So after we cut them, the timbers, everything was square. Then we came and we like smashed it with like chains and hammers. Yeah, and that's what they wanted. They wanted it to look rough. So because that was usually people like the clean look. So most all of our timbers are sanded before they go to site. So and then they get stained. That rustification comes pretty popular, which is nice because it takes the stain very well because of that grain. Like it really absorbs the stain very well, so you don't have to stain it as often. It's a kind of a cool look because, as you know, timbers, for if you use pine, for example, it's a pretty soft material. So by mistake, I don't know, you move a furniture and you can dig it, and there will like be that little knot knocked on the timbers. If you have a little bit of character, like, well, that was part of it. You really can't tell. So yeah, few options.
Nico, we found that a lot of our clients, they do love the look of the old reclaimed timbers that you get from barns. And we've worked with some amazing craftspeople, a lot of Mennonite craftspeople that will take these reclaimed timbers, and they still have the original markings from the woodworking tools like the adze and so on. It's exciting to hear that you can duplicate some of that on your machinery to get that rustication, because that's part of the character of the wood as well, is that it has that memory of the handwork on it. Another interesting project we had was up on Lake of Bays, and there's two things going material-wise for the cottage. One is that the owner of it was the owner of one of the quarries up near Huntsville, so we had access to this beautiful granite, like surface scabbed granite that we had hand selected. We had a good stonemason, but just coincidentally, in the water offshore, there were some buried logs from the logging era. Now, I'm sure that he had all the approvals to claim this timber. So he had timbers from the logging area with all the markings and so on, and we ended up taking it out, kiln drying it, and then using it as a mantle over fireplace. Awesome. Went with the look of the overall place, which was more of a hybrid. So sometimes you could do a timber frame, Nico, and then highlight like certain feature timbers as well. So you could go with timbers that you're supplying, and then still get some of these either reclaimed timbers or Mennonite timbers to complete the look, if that's what you want, couldn't you?
Exactly, yeah, and mostly for decorative elements, like you said, like Menton, or you can add like a few decorative rafters. That's for that. It's a great idea.
Nico, on a lot of the projects and on some upcoming projects, like I like to focus on what the client has selected instead of what I've used. What the clients have gone for is reclaimed timbers, and they're coming out of places like the Ottawa Valley. Still, there's timbers that are reclaimed, and reclaimed hemlock for the flooring as well, both which have settled in time because they've been waterlogged, and they have some of that real true Canadian cottage country character to it. But I think that dovetails really nicely with more precise work that you would do in the shop with CNC, and then we bring in these feature timbers so that we can get the most bang for the buck on a particular budget, whether it's $80,000 for some timbers or whether it's $500,000 or $800,000 for an exquisite resort. It's all possible to us, isn't it?
The thing with reclaimed timbers, it's hard to put them on our CNC machine because it needs to be a perfect square or rectangular timbers for the CNC machine to know how to grab it, where to cut it. So reclaimed timbers are usually not perfectly square. So that's a great idea to use like structured timbers and then between them add like reclaimed timbers as decorative.
Just for our viewers, here's how it goes historically with architects and engineers, myself being an architect and Nico the engineer. We end up in the same place, but along the way, sometimes one is leaning more towards exclusively the structure and productivity, and on the architectural side, sometimes there's a little whimsy and experimentation, and it all comes together. So it's good to have a couple of different approaches. We find that also on site with our workers and timber framers, they bring a little bit of character to things too, because they'll have built things a certain way. And I'll just give you a quick example. On one of our mid-century modern timber projects, this is on a small lake off of Lake Muskoka, it's Morrison Lake. And what we did there is we did a traditional timber frame, and when our windows came in, we got windows that have the anodized aluminum on the outside, and on the inside they're Douglas fir so that they match the framing. But between the windows there's a lot of framing. So what we did, to the dismay of the engineer, and I'm pretty sure, Nico, you might have been the one on it at the time, what we did is we wanted to have more like complete glass on the lakeside. So what we actually did is, on the advice of the framers, is we took apart the window frames and we mulled the big sliders with the clear story windows, the transom windows above. So just based on what people build, like timber framers have done on the lakes and stuff, we've picked up some details, and so we modified the original engineering design a little bit, but we benefit from what people are doing on the lakes, and so we all learn from each other, project to project too. Nico, I've had Nico. You've been involved in some other projects for us as well. Like, did you find with building your own place, Nico, that when you would have had to coordinate your mechanical systems, like your heating, your HRV, which is the fresh air return, there's line feeds. If you're going with a timber frame, you need to plan for concealing these areas or having like back chases and that. And I think from what I've seen at your place, you've done that pretty successfully. Like, you don't have exposed.
Like you said, like you want everything to be well thought ahead of time. That's why working with an architect like you can make sure like every single line, like you know that the edge vac is not gonna look out of place. Like, even if like you also want to, with a plumber, like sometimes they need to have to run some pipes and stuff, and with the timbers, like, you don't want to drill big holes on the timbers and things like that. So you want to make sure everything is well thought with all, like, from like start to finish on the entire project.
Yeah, so it takes a little bit of extra planning. In some cases too, like at Chandos Lake, we have some areas there where, because it's a complete pure timber frame, there isn't a lot of concealed areas to run services and so on. So what we ended up doing, not dissimilar to the background that I have in the studio right now, in certain areas we've actually brought down drop ceilings, and not bulkheads, but drop slat ceilings, so that we can filter out the view of certain like ducts and so forth. In most cases, we're not running duct work in timber frame places. A lot of it is in-floor radiant heating. It's on a geothermal system, and it's mostly concealed. It's all concealed. It's in the floors. Now, with some of the rules in the building code, we need fresh air returns, and also these days, a lot of the times, the mechanical engineers will specify that they want, in these big structures, they want supplemental air conditioning, which are usually ductless systems. They're these split units. And the thing is that you actually see them, and they're not super attractive. Like, it's not the sort of thing that you necessarily want everywhere in your structure. So we've developed some solutions, again, not dissimilar to the background here, where we are recessing additional these heating and air conditioning units that are usually up high on walls. We're concealing them, they're in walls, and then we have carpentry solutions, meaning we are building out slat walls in front of this additional heating requirements. No ducts per se, but sometimes there's line feeds and so on. So if the question comes up, are we going to see mechanical systems or anything? And the answer is no, but it takes a little bit of design. Which leads me to my next thought. The thing that I really love about timber frame, Nico, is that it can create modern spaces because it has the big overhangs, unobstructed space, longer spans, and it can be super modern, but it still has a natural rustic quality to it, the very authentic, the feel of the Douglas fir. And we've experimented with different wood, which we can get into, Nico, like Douglas fir versus pine versus other woods. The thing, I just want to put it out there, the thing that I like working with Nico Fond as our structural engineer is that we can take designs and the sky's the limit. Like if we want to do something that's modern, cantilevered over the lake, it's pretty exciting. Like we can do work that's a little edgier because Nico is invested. He's quite strong in structural engineering, timber, steel, and so on. So sometimes there's hybrid solutions that we're still getting the look, but beneath it all, there's really sound structural engineering. And to the point, on these projects when I'm adding even an inch of concrete topping, Nico is insisting that we're going back, doing calculations, making sure that there isn't too much deflection, loads. So it's quite a thorough process, and that's one thing I like. I think is great working with Nico from Bridgewood Engineering. Now, Nico, I just wanted to dispel some misconceptions that might be out there before we go on. So some of the timber frame naysayers out there, they're throwing out some ideas or comments, and what it comes down to is this. At the end of things, like the owner, the homeowner should build what they're interested in building and what they feel strongly about. Is timber frame does it add too much cost to a project? I would say no, because we can use timber in degrees and other wood products. And the important thing though is to work with an architect and an engineer that are experienced in timber frame right off the bat. So a lot of people think that they design in timber, but I assure you, even if you've designed in timber, if you're not doing it regularly, you're not benefiting from what's happening out in the field. So as I went through, I worked with an actual timber framer and did physical construction myself. So the reason I bring that up is that by seeing the materials and knowing how heavy it is and what the spans are, a lot of people can build, but can you build elegantly? Can you build with the right amount of timber for your project, and can you make it work? So my suggestion is that right off the bat, work with people that have the experience, work with actual timber framers so that you can benefit from what they've seen and done on previous projects. There's a real, Nico, would you agree there's a bit of a culture to timber framing?
For sure. Yeah. No, it's an art, right? Like you want to know what you're doing when you use timbers, because if it's not done properly, well, first of all, it's going to cost you a fortune, and then it's not going to look good. It's not going to age well. Like the joinery might separate, the timbers, it's a living material, so you want to make sure you work with it properly. If not, timbers can twist. A lot of things can go wrong if you don't do it properly with like the right people.
So Nico, if we have individuals out there that are interested in the timber frame, would you say, like on a new project, would you say that they would speak with someone like you and myself early on, or can they throw this together like after they're all framed up with stick frame and drywall, acres of drywall? Can they just can they add the timber on later and still get the same look, or should they integrate early on with a timber team?
You know, the best is really to have it to bring us early on. Like the sooner you think about the timbers, the better. Like usually you almost want to design the house around, like if it's a full timber frame, like you want to design the house around the timbers. Even if if there are a few decorative timbers you want to add, it's still way better to add them before. First of all, the engineer will need to know the extra loading when he designs the house. So the builder will need to know the extra blockings and everything. So it's really not a good idea to add, like once the house is done, let me add some timbers. It's possible, but first of all, it's going to cost you more money to do it that way, much more work. So yeah, way better to do it ahead of time at the design process to bring us up at the really beginning.
There's more flexibility early on, isn't there?
Exactly, yeah. Like I said, you can design around the timber much easier.
So to let viewers know how it worked for us let's use Chandos Lake as an example. The whole process it's an enriched process for the right client. And by this I mean with the tools now and with the software and with the way that we work, the owner can actually be part of the design process. What I do is I sit down with the owner and we're actually building in 3D modeling, and we're on a Zoom call or in person, and I'm taking instruction on the exact structure. Make it longer, make it wider, turn the kitchen towards the morning sunlight, I'll walk out to the lake to overlook the beautiful evening sunset, and so on. I'm working in software that includes the timber frame for the purpose of design intent, so that there's flexibility, and then we can get something that's really specific. The difference between this and just going to a timber frame company is the timber frame companies tend to have a lot of more standard design solutions, which can be great in some applications, but the clients that I have are typically looking for something that's really unique, a little more iconic, relating more to unusual, very interesting sites. I end up with a more custom solution, and the great thing about working with you, Nico, is that you take it then and you're bringing it into your own software right away, and it is precise. Like, I like to think that I'm precise with design and my thinking about how to develop a client's project, but then you take it and you're making it work engineering wise, great detailing. Here, just to be clear, Nico, you have equipment to fabricate, to carry off my clients' beautiful designs. You're going to be able to do it, and because we're both working in a similar way, Nico, there is the opportunity to develop our designs, and this is how we get the big overhangs, or the Bay of Quinte. That has giant exterior roof overhangs. The entire floor is overhanging the first floor with stone below and pure timber frame above. So that's the thing that I like. That's the way that I like to work. Nico, you're a structural engineer, but you're a pretty creative person. Like, I gotta admit, like, you're one of the most creative engineers that I've worked with, if not the most. Just tell me, just on a personal level, like, what is the most exciting thing, or what sort of projects do you get excited about? Like, what would you love to be your next project?
Like you said, big overhangs, it's fun. It can get repetitive sometimes engineering if you always do the same type of projects. But if there is challenges like you push us to do, that's a fun part where you push yourself to find solutions that looks good, that are economical, that will be strong and durable. So that's the fun part. For a new project, we want to get into mass timbers. We haven't done too many of those yet, commercial project and stuff like that, and it's really the same craft at the end of the day. So that's one thing we are looking to get into. But still, what we love is those big timber frame. We've done some very wide, 50 feet wide open space gazebo, and where we had to come up with some solutions where large overhangs are challenging, but they're fun to do. Yeah, we can do anything. Yeah.
Nico, I'm glad that you brought up the mass timbers. It's sort of at the forefront of timber design right now. And what mass timbers, just for our audience, it's a way of building where we're laminating pieces of solid timber, so we end up with solid timber panels. The advantage is that a lot of this is all done off-site, and then you're building in panels instead of building as a frame. And just coincidentally, I have Nico working on a private project, just an interesting project for myself, which is a residence and studios that are basically fairly modern and boxy, but timber built with flat timbers and separated by glass and breezeways. So this was a really interesting project, and we had different people involved. In case viewers don't know, our own son, my wife and ourselves, he's an engineering student at Waterloo. He was really instrumental in talking about overall ideas with Nico and myself, and bringing more modeling and new thinking into the process. And I'm hoping, Nico, that with the mass timbers, the CLT, we have some current upcoming projects that are leaning a little bit more on, like a little more, maybe more purely modern, still natural materials, still cottage, but a little, they're calling it the Scandinavian modern. It's really, it's been around, like architects like, or Alto and other like European architects have done this in the past, but it's really coming back. And I'm hoping that we can get into those sorts of projects because, Nico, not only are we're designing, we're doing the structural engineering, or I'm designing, you're doing the structural engineering, but we can be more resourceful with the sourcing and the supply of materials and material packages too. Isn't that right, Nico?
Yeah, that's great. Like with mass timber, like you said, like the advantage is, as with a timber frame where everything is pre-cut, with a mass timber, those CRT walls, they will be also, everything is pre-cut in the factory. So you have great quality control. And then you arrive on site and it's very easy to put together. So much faster build, better, yeah. You have a great quality product with very accurate too. So very little mistakes can be done on site.
Nico, thank you so much for an informative video. Is it safe to assume, like, the clients that I bring your way, do they bring a little bit of excitement back into timber structural engineering? Like the missing excitement, is it coming back?
That's why we love working with architects like you because, it challenges us. Like you said, like your projects are out of the box. Like it's not the typical project you will see out there. So it's fun. Every time it's not something we have ever done. So it pushes up to be better and to seek a better solution. And nowadays we have all those technology. We have like those very high-tech softwares to do structural engineering. We have those CNC machines. So we have all the tools. We just need the projects.
Thank you so much, Nico. That's a wonderful talk. A call to action for the viewers out there. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Nico is one of the best out there. I encourage you to check out our website and Nico's as well, lakesidearchitecture.ca, lakesideconstructionmanagement.ca. Nico's, I don't remember what's your website there?
BridgewoodEngineeringServices.com.
Okay, great. Feel free to give us a call. I'm going to be at the Cottage Life show upcoming weeks. I'm not sure whether I'll be a guest speaker at this particular show, but a lot of times that I am. But come visit us at the booth there. Also, feel free to give us a call. Maybe I can set up a little meeting like this. Nico and myself, both of us or either of us, we can do a quick little demonstration for you. If you're going to jump into a fantastic timber frame project, do not be misled. We have it all for you. We'll show you the projects. We'll show you the numbers. You know where you're going to get into. Timber frame project versus one that has more in it. Two different styles. You're going to love one of them. You're going to love Nico, and I really look forward to speaking with y'all. Thanks so much. Thanks, Nico.
Thank you so much, James. Thank you, everyone.